This is the Etsy Conversations podcast resource episode, and I'm your host, Ijoma. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the podcast. This is a resource episode. Basically, it's just me talking to you, and I'm going to be talking about more up-to-date things that are going on Etsy that you need to be aware of. And so specifically, what I'll be touching on in this episode is the ultimate guide to Etsy search. On September 19th, 2018, Etsy released their ultimate guide to Etsy search. If you are subscribed to the Etsy emails as a seller, you probably received this already. And so I'm just going to go over it with you and give some thoughts and insights. And if you haven't had a chance to review it yet, I'll be letting you know what's in it. Now, the guide is broken down into 7 different chapters, and I will not be going through all 7 chapters in this one episode. I'm going to break them up into separate episodes so it's easier for you to digest. And of the 7 chapters, 6 are available right now, and 1 chapter is still being constructed, I guess. If you want to go ahead and read them all yourself, and I do suggest that you do, I recommend that you do, they're in the seller handbook, freely available to everyone. And if you just want to listen to my summary and then also give some additional input based on what I'm doing and other information that I gather, that's what these podcast episodes will be focusing on. And just to give you a roadmap for how this will work, I'm still going to be doing the interview episodes, and I will have 1 week where I do this solo episode with information that Etsy is putting out, up-to-date information. Etsy is doing a lot of stuff right now. They're revamping so many things. So much is changing. And so I feel this is a good way for me to keep you more informed and more up to date as things are happening. And so for now, what I'll do is 1 week I'll do a resource episode where I bring you all this information, or the things that I think you should know. And then the next week I will do an interview episode. So we'll still have those till we're all caught up, which will probably be never. But I think you get the idea. So like I said, the Ultimate Guide to Etsy Search was released on September 19th, 2018. And according to Etsy, these are the current best practices that Etsy recommends as of September 2018. I'm recording this episode and it's going live in October of 2018. So this is pretty up to date. Also, Etsy was very deliberate to point out that subscribing to Etsy Plus or Etsy Premium has no effect on where your listings appear in search. So the first chapter in this ultimate guide to Etsy search is how Etsy search works. And so that's what I'm going to focus on in this particular episode. So first of all, what are the different phases of Etsy search and what factors go into search ranking? This is something we all want to know because everybody wants their listings to show up at the top when people search for what they are. So there are actually 2 phases. The first phase is query matching, and the second phase is ranking. Query matching is where a buyer types in what they're looking for, and then Etsy looks through all its listings to find a match. Ranking happens on the back end. Etsy ranks all the listings that match that particular query or search term based on various factors. Now, these factors are things that you're really going to want to pay close attention to. Also, Etsy uses what it calls context-specific ranking technology, or CSR, to rank its listings. They say that this CSR gives Etsy search information about shoppers' habits across Etsy. And it uses that information to show shoppers relevant listings that they are more likely to buy. Okay, so just keep that in mind. We'll come back to that later. So what is query matching? When a shopper types in something they're looking for on Etsy, Etsy then looks at the titles, tags, categories, and attributes that you have connected to your listings in order to find matching keywords. That's why it's important when you're creating your tags and your titles to use terms that you think people are going to use when they're looking for those terms. I mean, for that particular listing or that product. So think like a shopper. Think like a shopper. Think like the person who would want to buy what you're selling. On your end, other things that you can do to increase the chances that your listing will match up with search queries is, first of all, use all 13 tags. I know we've talked about it ad nauseum on the podcast, but it is very critical. Also, don't get comfortable with using the same tags repeatedly. Even if you sell the same product, try and switch them up from listing to listing. You can repeat them, but throw in some variety as well. Then add all relevant attribute options. Whatever you think is relevant to your product, go ahead and add it as an attribute for that particular listing. And then when it comes to your categories, try and be as specific as possible. We know that the categories on Etsy aren't perfect, but try and get as close as possible as you can. You'll notice that from time to time they do add new categories or the categories change. So just be aware of that. I've noticed that sometimes I'll get a notification that there was a change and I might need to reassign my categories. And a few times I've found that there was a better category for a particular product. So pay attention to those notifications when you get them, when you see them flagged in your shop manager. Etsy also recommends diversifying your inventory. So if you're a handmade seller, you can consider expanding your product lines. If you're a vintage seller or a supply seller, consider sourcing items that are outside your comfort zone, even if you stay within the same niche. For me, what that looks like is I primarily sell vintage crafting supplies. And initially, I was focusing mainly on sewing, knitting, and crochet. But now I am sourcing outside of those crafts. I am sourcing supplies for woodworking and wood turning, supplies for quilting and paper crafts, which has actually turned into a nice niche for me, which before I wasn't looking at. So expand your product line, and that's one of their recommendations. The next phase is ranking. So after Etsy pulls together the listings that match a search query, the next step is to rank those listings based on certain factors so that the listings that the buyer sees first, or at least early on in the results, are the ones that he or she is most likely to buy. So let's talk about the factors. There are a total of 7. And I don't know if the way Etsy listed them in their article is according to the order of importance. They don't say that, but I'm just going to go through them in the order that they do. But like I said, I don't know if one carries more weight than another based on how they talk about them. The very first one is relevancy. Again, this comes back to your tags, titles, categories, and attributes. and you just ensuring that as much as possible they match a buyer's search query. Well, you can't predict what the buyer will search for, but if Etsy sees an exact match of within your tags, your titles, the categories, and the attributes that you've put to a listing, if they see an exact match to what a buyer's search query is, then that particular listing of yours will be considered to be more relevant to search. And it may, they don't say it will for sure, they use the word may. It may be ranked higher in search results. The next factor that Etsy listed is listing quality score. Now, listings that convert into sales more often will get a higher listing quality score and also higher placement in search. When I say conversion means how many people look at it and then make a purchase. Now, I'm just going to go off on a little sidebar here. This part I'm going to talk about is not in the article. This is just me and my observation. I can see how this conversion factor works for sellers who offer multiples of one product, because if 5 people look at it and 3 buy, that you get a higher conversion rate than if 5 people look at it and only 1 person buys. But for one-of-a-kind products like vintage products or people who make jewelry that's one of a kind, or accessories that are one of a kind, or clothing that's just one, I can't quite wrap my head around how this works, because it can only be sold once, regardless of how many times it's viewed. So if you put a new a necklace that there's only one of on sale, and one person looks at it and buys it, but then you're never going to list that particular necklace again. But then let's say you take the same necklace and 5 people look at it, and it doesn't get sold till that 5th person looks at it. Once again, it's sold, it's gone. You're not going to have that listing again. So I'm not quite sure how the listing quality score plays into the equation for people who sell one-of-a-kind items. But if that's not you, then just know that your conversion rate for those particular products will affect your search in your placement in search. And so what that means is you want to figure out how to increase your conversion rates. Figure out how to get more people to buy that, more people who look at that particular listing to buy it. And there's a whole guide to that. It's called Creating Listings That Convert, and I'll talk about that in a separate episode. Now, still with regard to listing quality score, vacation mode comes into play. If you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know we've talked about it before, and nobody's ever really known. In the past, Etsy said, well, putting your shop on vacation mode doesn't affect where it ranks, and some people felt that it did, some people felt that it didn't. Now, as of September 2018, we know definitively. This article says that when you put your shop on vacation mode, it can decrease search traffic to your shop, but your listing quality score will remain the same. So it holds on to that data from before your shop went on vacation mode. So then when you turn off vacation mode, your listings start appearing in search again, then Etsy starts, or the machine or whatever, starts observing again how shoppers are interacting with your listings. And then your listing quality score, again, based on conversion rate, can change. And that subsequently means that your product's position in search, the rankings in search, can change as well. So there we have it. Next up is recency. Again, this is something we've talked about on the podcast too. Now, when you create a new listing, this is a brand new listing, it will get a small temporary boost in search. And Etsy says that they do this so that they can figure out how buyers are interacting with that particular listing and then assign it a listing quality score. If you have an older listing and it gets renewed, it also gets a small boost in search, but not to the same extent that a brand new listing gets. So renewing your listing helps, but not as much as creating brand new listings. And according to Etsy, this boost in search that new and renewed listings get is temporary. Both are temporary and can last anywhere from just a few hours to up to a few days. And that all just depends on how people are interacting with the product. So if it's a brand new listing and it's getting lots of eyeballs and people are, now I don't know what the interaction they're measuring is, if they're favoriting it or putting it in their shopping carts, maybe to come back for later, I don't know. But they just said how people are interacting with it. So, So again, if you regularly renew your items, you do get a small boost, but Etsy does say that it's not an effective strategy for optimizing your listings for search. And instead, they recommend that you improve your tags and your conversion rate. So basically, make sure you're using terms, keywords that people are searching for, and that when people do look at your listings, that they're turning into actual buyers more often. Those two things, Etsy says, will help your search ranking more than just renewing your listings. Next is your customer and market experience score. Etsy wants happy customers like any other marketplace. Happy customers turn into return customers, turn into telling their friends about Etsy and bringing more people to the platform. So every shop gets assigned a customer and market experience score, and that score factors into where you rank in search placement. So the things that go into determining what your customer and market experience score are: your reviews. You want to make sure you're getting the best reviews possible, so 5-star all the way. I don't know what the star rating you get affects your search, but obviously aim for 5 stars. Also, you need to have complete shop policies. Etsy makes this easy because you can use their template and then just customize it for your shop. And I believe I said this a while ago, but if you do use their template, I think it helps even more if you use the template that they give you, and then you can make adjustments to it. Also, if you have any cases that were opened up against you, obviously that's going to affect where you rank in search, and by affect I mean negatively affect. So you will go down in search placement. Having open cases against you, as well as intellectual property infringement issues. So you want to make sure you're not infringing on anyone's intellectual property and that no one is reporting you for potential intellectual property infringement. There's a system for reporting that to Etsy, and I think I reviewed this in another episode, what the steps are, how Etsy will let you know how much time you have to respond, etc. And so you just want to make sure you avoid those. Also, you can listen to the episodes. I believe there were 178 and 179 where I had the lawyer on and we talked about copyright infringement and intellectual property infringement if you want to understand those topics a bit more. Factor number 5 is shipping price. So I know everyone thinks Etsy wants you to offer free shipping, but here's the deal. I think they do too, because they say that if you offer free shipping, it could improve your search ranking even more. So you might have to figure out, if it works for you, how to roll the price of shipping into your product price so that you can say shipping is free with quotes. We know it's not really, but if you price your product such that you can offer free shipping, you could improve where you show up in search. And also Etsy will put that free shipping badge on the listing in search results. And if you shop online today, you know a lot of online shoppers like that free shipping, that idea of free shipping. So I do think that this is a way of encouraging that. But in addition to that, Etsy did a survey in March of 2018, and according to the results, they said that buyers said they were 50% less likely to buy something if they thought that the price of shipping was more expensive, even if it was just a little bit more expensive than they were used to. So because of that, Etsy uses shipping price as a factor in search rankings. And so if you have lower shipping prices, you're more likely to be ranked higher in search than if you have higher shipping prices. And one thing I've noticed is as I'm creating new listings, there are some items that I'll put, because I play with flat rate shipping to see if I can do that for some of my listings, so that it's just easier sometimes. And for certain weight, certain products that fall within a certain weight category, I charge a flat fee. And so sometimes when I'm creating the listing, I'll get a warning from Etsy saying that the majority of products that weigh this cost less to ship than what I'm trying to charge for the flat rate shipping, which to me is a flag that says, hey, if this is what you're going to charge for shipping, these listings that have this shipping price are going to rank lower in search, because that's essentially what they're saying here. So if Etsy thinks that what I'm charging for flat rate shipping is higher than it should be, that's going to affect me in search. And so if you get those flags as well, if you charge flat rate shipping prices, then be aware of that. So for me, how I'm adjusting that is I just put in the weight of my products, and I just let the shipping calculator do it. I do add a little bit. I think I do like 35 cents or 50 cents, I forget, to make up the cost for the shipping materials, because I do buy shipping supplies. I buy envelopes, paper. I send personalized thank you cards that I handwrite. And so I put a processing fee. Thank you. That's what it's called. Processing fee of 50 cents. And so then Etsy will calculate the shipping and then put in my processing fee, so that and then, that accounts for the labels and all whatnot. And I think it's 50 cents. I have to go back and look. But yes, I do add a processing fee. So that's shipping price and how it affects where your listings show up in search. The next factor is translations and language. I personally never thought about this, but Etsy is a global marketplace, and so it makes sense that this would be a factor. if you remember when you first opened your Etsy shop, you had to choose a shop language. So you're supposed to put the title and tags for your listings in the language you chose when you first set up your Etsy shop, rather than putting them in a different language because perhaps you want to show up in searches in a particular region. And so what Etsy does is you use the language that that you chose for your shop, and then Etsy will translate your keywords and all whatnot and show shoppers relevant matches based on that. You do have the option, though, to add your own translations to your listings. And because the translations you add to yourself, if you speak a language, will probably be higher quality and more basically better translations than what a machine can do. Etsy gives you a way to be able to do that so that your search rankings are even better. And that there's an article that explains how you can do that. I will make a separate recording about that and release that another later on down the road. But just so you know now, make sure your tags, your titles are in the language that you chose for your shop. So if you chose something other than English, for example, don't put your tags and titles in English hoping to rank higher in search. Etsy is on to all that. It won't work. Finally is what Etsy calls shoppers' habits. You might have heard this discussed already, but basically Etsy is giving shoppers a personalized experience on the platform. And so using the CSR, that's that context-specific ranking technology, Etsy basically figures out what buyers are interested in, and then it shows them those items that it believes, based on their behavior and their habits on Etsy, that they're most likely to buy. So what I might see when I'm shopping on Etsy is not necessarily what you would see when you're shopping on Etsy, because we have different shopping behavior. This is all very AI and technological for me. I don't know how it all works, but I think this is some, part of a mystery to Etsy search that we just have to leave up to the machines and work on our own listings just to make sure they're the best they can be and that people are buying them. So one of the things that they suggest is that we as sellers, instead of trying to find our own listings and figure out where in search they fall, and I know I'm guilty of this. I've tried to figure out where my listings rank in Etsy search, and I have to admit I was kind of depressed because I didn't see my listings for a while, but it makes sense here because I don't shop for my own listings, so Etsy wouldn't show me my listings because I don't buy my own listings. So what they recommend is that instead you use the data from your stats to figure out which listings are performing well and which ones aren't, and then make adjustments. So the ones that are performing well, look at the tags that you used and the titles, and then see if you can apply that to use that information to improve your listings that aren't performing quite as well. And we'll go into more detail about this in when I cover the listings that convert article for you. But for now, these are the factors that you need to be aware of that will affect your ranking in Etsy search. And this is just an overview of how Etsy search works. The next chapter is all about keywords and tags and how to come up with new keywords, etc. And I will be going over that with you in 2 weeks. Next week, I have another interview scheduled for you. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at interview@convome.com, or you can reach out to me on social media. I'm on Instagram, and there's the Facebook page as well. And I will be back next week.